loving her. Fred Weasley. Prologue. Two years after the Battle of Hogwarts. Chapter 1. Liliana's POV. I glanced at the clock from behind the counter of my restaurant. It was 8:30, half an hour until dinner at the Burrow. Saturday dinners, Sunday breakfasts, and lunches at the Burrow had become a weekly tradition for us. Molly had insisted on it ever since all her children had moved out. She wanted to keep the family close. It was a rule everyone happily followed. I'd closed the restaurant half an hour ago and had spent the time cleaning up and doing the accounts for the day, as well as recording all the books sold and rented. After finishing up the books, I waved my wand to finish the last bits of cleaning. With a final flick, I grabbed the keys, locked the door, and headed out. The restaurant had 2 floors. The first floor had a large library that took up 3/4 of the space, filled with shelves upon shelves of books. I had designed the layout to give the room a vast, open feel. Beside the door was the counter where we rang up books and took food orders. There were 5 tables scattered throughout the room. The second floor had 10 tables and a bar counter. I made it look beautiful, with hanging lights, love tables for couples, and paintings, a cafe environment for people to hang out, reading a book or study or do their office-related works. My 3 staff members, Christopher, Alexander, and Nicholas, were all incredibly friendly and helpful. Nick and Alex served the food, while Chris managed the bar. All the food was prepared by magic, which made things easy most of the time. I'd let the staff go home early around 8 o'clock, after they flipped the sign to closed. I was wearing blue baggy jeans, a white short top, and a black overcoat. My hair hung loose around my shoulders. I had a beautiful rose ring on my right middle finger, which I wear all the time. I had on a new pair of black heels. I always put heels as they would make me appear taller in front of my friends, as I was the shortest among us. Though I wasn't exactly skinny, I had curves, a good waist, and yes, a little bit of a tummy, thick thighs, which I didn't mind. What I did mind, though, was how much my ankle hurt as I walked, the heels giving me bruises I'd have to deal with later. I had a couple of books and files to drop at home, and I needed to feed my 2 cats, Vanilla, a fluffy white cat, and Pepper, a black one. I decided to let the twins head to the Burrow first, while I would go home to take care of a few things. When I arrived at the Weasley shop, the door was unlocked, but no one was inside. I held the doorknob and opened it. "Where are you guys? If we're late, Molly will..." I stopped mid-sentence when I saw something unexpected. A familiar redhead and a girl making out, their shirts off. I immediately slammed the door shut. Sorry, didn't see a thing, I swear," I mumbled, my face buried in my hands as I leaned on the nearby table. My stomach churned with an odd sensation. I couldn't figure out whether it was George or Fred. I was terrified that it was Fred. I had liked Fred since our 5th year at Hogwarts, when we both joined Dumbledore's army. Back then, I had thought of him as just a charming troublemaker, always with a mischievous grin and a prank up his sleeve. But over the years, something had shifted. It wasn't just his humor or his clever wit that drew me in. It was the way he could make everything feel lighter, even in the darkest of times. There was a warmth in his eyes that made you feel like you mattered, like everything would be okay, as long as you had him around. I usually could tell them apart, but today I couldn't. My heart raced as I tried to process what I had just walked in on. "Did you walk in on my brother making out with his girlfriend Anna?" a voice called from behind me. I looked up and sighed in relief. It was Fred, and I could tell it was George with the girl. Only Fred called me Anna. Yeah, the door was slightly open, so I thought it would be fine to walk in. But I was wrong, I explained, crinkling my nose as the image of them making out flashed back to my mind. "I went to throw out the trash, and he starts snogging her," Fred muttered, shaking his head. "Come on, let's go. It'll probably take them ages to finish whatever they're doing." He went inside the storeroom to check on something. After a few minutes, he came back. "Shall we go then?" he asked. "Actually, I have to feed my cats and drop something off at my place, so you go ahead and I'll catch up with you later," I replied. "All right, then let's head to your place first and then we'll go to the Burrow," Fred said with a warm smile. I nodded, and we flew to my place. As we entered my house, the soft patter of paws and meows echoed in the room. Almost immediately, my two cats came rushing toward me, rubbing against my legs with little purrs of happiness. I knelt down, gently stroking their fur with a wide smile. "Oh, my poor little babies. Did you miss Mama?" I cooed, scooping up Vanilla, a fluffy white Persian cat, and placing a kiss on her head. "I'm so sorry I kept you hungry," I added, scratching her chin affectionately. When I turned to pat Pepper, I stopped in my tracks and smiled as I noticed Fred crouching beside him. He was gently stroking Pepper, who surprisingly didn't try to dart away. "Well, well," I said with a teasing grin. "It looks like he's starting to like you a lot." Fred chuckled, glancing up at me. What can I say? I've got a way with charm, even with the stubborn ones. Shaking my head at his cheeky reply, I carried Vanilla toward the kitchen while Fred remained seated on the floor, still entertaining Pepper. I paused to look around my home, a simple but cozy 2-story house that I'd poured my heart into. To the right of the living room was an open kitchen, where a small 4-seater dining table sat neatly in the corner. On the left side of the living room was my pride and joy, a library I had put together. The room had walls lined with shelves packed with books, and at the center were 2 cozy armchairs with a soft footrest. In front of it was a little coffee table. In the middle of the living room stood a comfortable couch with a table facing the TV, with a soft rug underneath, and a small cat home for my furry companions to play and sleep. I carried my files and books to my room, placing them on the desk before sitting on the edge of my bed. Kicking off my heels, I winced as I scanned my feet and ankles. Bruises and red marks lined my toes and heels, with spots of dried blood where my new shoes had bitten into my skin. Sighing, I placed my heels in my shoe cupboard and reached for a more comfortable pair of heeled boots. I grabbed a box of bandages and ointment from my bathroom drawer and headed back to the living room. When I walked in, I stopped for a moment and smiled at the sight before me. Fred was lounging on the couch, his head tilted back with his eyes closed. Vanilla was curled up contentedly on his lap, while Pepper had claimed the spot beside him, purring softly. Unable to resist, I waved my wand, summoning my camera from the shelf in the library. With a quiet click, I captured the heartwarming scene before carefully setting the camera aside. I placed the bandages on the coffee table and the boots on the floor, before heading into the kitchen to grab the cat food. As I filled their bowls, I heard Fred's voice behind me. "Why the bandages?" he asked, his voice slightly groggy, probably woken up by the movement of the cats. "I bruised my feet with my new heels," I replied, walking back into the living room and setting the bowls down for Vanilla and Pepper. I sat beside Fred on the couch and began applying the ointment to my wounds. Fred watched me for a moment, then shook his head and grabbed the bandages and ointment from my hands. "You've got bruised legs, and you're wearing heels again?" he said, his tone a mix of exasperation and amusement. "Why do you keep wearing something that hurts you? They're new, so they bruise," I said with a shrug, "and I don't own any flats." Fred muttered something under his breath, shaking his head again as he carefully dabbed the ointment onto my bruises. His touch was gentle and deliberate, and I couldn't help but stare at him as he worked. "You shouldn't have to hurt yourself for shoes," he said softly, securing the bandage over my ankle. My cheeks flushed slightly at the unexpected sweetness in his voice, and the way he was so focused on tending to me. My heart fluttered for a brief moment, but I quickly pushed the feeling down. I knew Fred only saw me as his sibling's best friend, nothing more. Only Ginny and Harry knew about my crush on him, and I planned to keep it that way. "Thanks," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze as I pulled my socks and shoes back on. Fred leaned back on the couch, crossing his arms as he watched Vanilla settle back into his lap. The silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but thick with unspoken thoughts. "Let's go," I say, after kissing both my cats. Without saying much more, we both stood up and flew ourselves to the burrow.